was hit the name of that movie really shouldn't be King of Comedy. It hit me during the screen. The name of it should be King of like awkwardness.
Yeah.
King of cringing. King of embarrassment. King of missed social cues.
Don't you think it's the kind of movie that you could watch at home alone and like never laugh? But then when you watch it with 280 people, somehow all of the awkwardness kind of makes us need to laugh.
But the real question, I think, and this is the eternal question of this movie, is Rupert funny? Is he talented?
Yeah.
You know, he killed, unless he got laughs. I've had this argument with a lot of people. Oh, he's a nobody, he's nothing, he's a creep, he's a psychopath. On national TV, he didn't seem much worse than a lot of others.
Yeah.
What's the message?
Who thinks Rupert's funny?
Who thinks he kind of funny?
There's kind of something funny about
He got it done. We've seen worse.
Yeah, it's really funny jokes.
Yeah. And his psychology that he reveals there, and in some of his fantasies with Jerry. Oh, I think of all the bad things. And that's the psychology of a professional comic, of a lot of artists. The delusion to be famous and all that probably goes with that. So it's pretty fascinating. But, I think you can see why De Niro found that character so he wanted to play that character. So he can see himself in it. No, of course not. Of course not. But then I always think of things like class and family connections. If you meet most people in show business, they were just smoother socially. He was just awkward. He just didn't have that social thing. But he didn't read those books. He didn't read Zig Ziglar. But you see what I was trying to say before, like, if you study how the movie's shot, it's really shot from Rupert's perspective. It's kind of like a TV show. There's very few close-ups in the movie. I was looking at it. Like, the only close-up that you consider like a close-up is when Rita kind of nicks that item from Jerry's house.
Yeah, that's the only sort of insert shot.
Yeah, there's no inserts. It's shot very plain. That's what I was trying to say before. That was what was so disappointing at the time. But I think it's really bold now to really capture Rupert's worldview cinematically. And just the kind of flatness of it.
And the messiness. There's sort of like European style messiness to it.
I know that Scorsese, he let Jerry Lewis direct all the TV sequences. Lewis directed all the shows, all the comedy stuff. Apparently they reshot his monologue several times. Like they came back and shot the comedic monologue. The movie went way over budget, apparently. They shot for just 20 weeks and it just kept going. The scene at Jerry's house in Long Island, can we agree that's like the creepiest scene in film history? That's like when his fantasy world kind of conflates with the reality. It's just, at first you think is this a fantasy? But it's too detailed. It's like, oh no, this can't be happening. It's just so...
It's so interesting how the fantasy sequences are not offset by like a colored filter or anything like that. They happen in exactly the sequence that they would happen in real life. It's up to you to kind of identify that, no, this is his delusion.
Yeah, but his delusions are very realistic, and that's kind of the tone of the movie. Those seem like logical for his kind of mindset. Paul Zimmerman, who wrote the script, he talked about the original script was very much more fantasy. He saw him as like a Danny Kaye character who lived in a fantasy world. And De Niro and Scorsese went off and rewrote the script. And he loved it. He loved what they did, but he said, oh, they're realists. They took it in a very real direction. So I think it works in those kind of scenes. And he said the character of Masha was much more sentimental and weepy, but the casting of Bernhardt and then their style makes her much more predatory, much more kind of creepy, real, sad.
Yeah, it's an essay in different styles when you have the scene played with Jerry Lewis and Sandra Bernhard. It's just their styles clash so hard.
Their energies. It's like, what are they doing in the same room together? It's so unnerving while it showed the back and forth. Every time you cut back to Sandra Bernhard, you kind of go, oh no, what's going to happen? Which what? With her in there. I know. That makes it all the more unnerving.
I wonder if people who want to have the discussion kind of just move in a little bit. If we got people who are kind of having our discussion, that's cool. But let's, this is an odd format that you're trying for the first time. Maybe not stick to, but try for the first time. Does anybody have any questions or points they'd like to make about it?
Oh, my character kind of wants to kill you. And so that was the tone between them.
It had been a while since De Niro had played a character that was open, that opened out and didn't close in. It had been since like Hi Mom or whatever, Greetings or something. Since he had played a character who was expansive, ready to boogie.
There's sort of a blankness there, where we were so used to these just obsessive, brooding kind of characters. So he's just so different, such a different choice. And, you know, I've never really read an interview with De Niro where he talked about his motivation, but I'm always kind of fascinated. Just I still think it's such a brave choice.
Have you ever met De Niro?
I haven't. No, I know Scorsese a little bit.
Yeah. A friend of mine who was a director who passed away told me a story about De Niro that I always kind of see it when I watch a De Niro performance. He said, Robert De Niro is Jamal Fanaka, the director of Penitentiary and other movies, a friend of De Niro.
Yeah.
They said, Robert De Niro is the greatest actor I've ever seen. And I was like, well, give me an example. He said, one time we were at Cannes, and he didn't drink. And so he said, you want to see how good an actor I am? This is an apocryphal story. And he filled up an entire tumbler drinking glass with water, or with vodka, and he drank the whole thing. And Jamal said, he's such a good actor that he didn't even act drunk. That's the kind of story Rupert Pupkin would tell.
Yeah, he's a chameleon kind of guy too. Not your, he was the anti-hero. You got that
Yeah.
Idiot.
Okay. We might do this next week in the theater. We're just trying something different. Let's just see how it works. Anyway, yeah, right over here.
I was a part of the original Pee Wee Herman show.
Oh, great.
And we performed in Hollywood from 81 to like 82. And during the performance, Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese were in the 90-seat theater. We used to do it at the Groundlings. And they were there doing research for a new film they were working on. It was a comedy. And I recognized a few things from that production, that the suit, for example, the gray suit with the red bow tie, all that was, he took some things from Paul. The mom, the way he says, Mom, all those things.
Is that kind of whiny?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when Robert De Niro and Scorsese were there, we were backstage getting ready, and everyone was talking about that they were the audience. Of course, we had a little hole in the curtain, and Paul was so Paul was so nervous.
Oh, I bet.
He had sweat stains. Before we even got on stage, he had huge sweat stains. And he turned so quickly, he was so nervous, his contact fell out. Oh. So he was half blind. But Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese, we watched them the whole time. They loved the show. I guess they were doing research at least 2 years before.
He's telling a wonderful Pee Wee Herman story, who was like one of the biggest comedians at that time.
Yes, it was a big hit show.
Yeah, big hit show.
And then we went to the Roxy after that, but it was before the TV show.
Studying. Yeah,
that's an amazing insight into the role of Pee Wee Herman.
Well, he did that suit at the end, the little bow tie.
Right.
That's kind of Pee Wee Herman-ish.
And the shoes.
Famously, Scorsese wanted Johnny Carson to play Langford. It's obviously written for him. Even they used the biographical. The time you got on par, You know, and this was written in the 70s, and so it's hard to kind of think about today when there were really only 3 networks. I mean, Johnny Carson was God. So the attitude toward this, you know, it's very real to that time. Johnny Carson was such a big cultural figure, and there'll never be anybody that big, just because there's so many stations and so many shows. There really weren't that many, and so he was it, and they really wanted him to play the part. And I think I heard that. I mean, he thought about it, but he was actually afraid. I think he had stalkers after him a lot. He thought he would be killed. He just didn't want to go there, and so they started thinking of Dean Martin, who had a show, and other people, but they settled on Jerry Lewis, which I can't imagine anybody else now.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah, because he is funny, but then you get that anger, you know, underneath that, there's that simmering just, and that was apparently one of his bigger improvs, was the incompetent, you know, all when he's explaining his motives, and if, you know, he's trying to talk himself out of the situation, but they said, you know, that was all him. That's how he felt about, you know, you got to feel sympathy for him in that, oh yeah, he's this big star, but yeah, his life is kind of, he's in his own prison, you know, in that way. So, but I think that's probably one of the reasons maybe for the film's, I don't know if it's commercial failure or lack of identification, because it does a funny thing, this movie, that you don't see in Taxi Driver or Raging Bull or any of the others, or most movies actually, where this movie could have been made 100% from Rupert's perspective, but it really does open itself up to Langford's perspective. You know, every time you make a movie, you have to think, whose point of view is the movie? Well, this is unique, and I think that's what Scorsese brought to it, because he felt himself in both characters. And he had achieved a lot of success by then, so he and De Niro both could relate to the striving, obsessive, will do anything to succeed, you know, person who hadn't achieved anything. But then he could also very much relate to the person who's kind of famous and who's seen as made it. So I think he was both characters. But the film takes that point of view, and it's in a way deadly, I think, because you judge Rupert. Like, if you think of Taxi Driver, you go into Travis Bickle's mindset. You see the world and everything from his perspective, and you agree with him, and you so identify with him. You never jump outside of Travis, because then you would say, oh, this guy's he's a psychopath. I mean, you would lose that identification, where this one allows you to sort of lose and judge Rupert in a way kind of more from Jerry's perspective. By representing Jerry so much, you sort of judge Rupert from his perspective. And it's not good, you know. It's kind of like, oh, this guy is kind of, you know.
Would you call this movie a black comedy?
Yeah.
Probably the blackest.
It's definitely, I don't know, but not in the traditional sense. It's not Strangelove. It's not like everybody's in on this joke. They're kind of in their own worlds. You know, the people who work on the show, you know, Shelley Heck, and, you know, everyone's in their own. They all have different agendas.
One interesting thing about this is when Paul Zimmerman wrote this.
It's an unnerving comedy. I haven't heard it's a black comedy.
I haven't heard this mentioned that often, but the director who Paul Zimmerman first worked with when he was developing the script was Milos Forman. So it does have a kind of, like as a black comedy, not so much a Strangelove type, but as more of like a Central European or an Eastern European, kind of oddball, crazy satire.
It's definitely oddball.
Yeah,
but it's out of time. I think King of Comedy is just, there was probably never, even in the 70s, this would have been, you know, the anti-hero and all. It probably would have been more accepted, but this film's sort of out of time and place, as is Rupert. You know, a character like that, I think he's forever kind of lost.
It falls into this, sort of the great continuum of kind of shaggy dog movies, and movies that just don't quite fit. They don't fit in their time, don't fit in the filmography of the creator exactly, but oh my God, thank God for those.
Yeah, that's what's so cool, that they put all that.
Which one of your movies is your king of comedy? Is your shaggy dog?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Most of them.
You have a career of shaggy dog movies. I wonder if we have any other contributions from the audience here.
What else do you want to talk about? We're just battling on.
Earlier when we started talked about that space and bouncing back and forth. One thing I noticed was that when we were in the real world, the framework felt very busy, very cluttered, very aggressive. And whenever we jumped into his
The fantasies, yeah.
it would kind of open up and give a little more space and a little more breathing. And that's to tie it all back together with the scene at Jerry's house. Like, it's so deceptive because it's so open. It starts on that wide shot of the guy driving up, and you think that it's like we're at peace in his head. And it's so tricky.
Yeah, because it's an intimate space. Yeah, Rupert's space is never, except the little, his little room in the basement of his mom's house or whatever. He's on streets. It is cluttered, but his fantasies, he's in an intimate, restaurant, an office. That's his ideal world. I think you have to buy your way into that. So, but yeah, that's such a weird scene. When he goes to that house, it's just so unnerving.
How do you feel the film works? This is my second time seeing it.
Yeah.
And this time I was really struck by, it feels like a comment on the nature of celebrity. And it kind of ties to what you said about how you're kind of meant to judge Rupert. And so you're sitting there going, Jesus Christ, this guy's a sociopath, this guy's nuts, this guy's creepy. But then he goes on TV and he kills it.
And he's pretty good, yeah.
And so it sort of creates that divide.
Yeah, that's
about all these people you see on TV and they're awesome, and then you have to think, well, what are they like when the lights go down?
Yeah, what's the difference between, where does talent fit into celebrity? That's what's different. The celebrity obsession back then was at least it was people who did something. Like now we have all these celebrities who don't do anything. Yeah. And I gotta hand it to Rupert, he's at least striving to provide some laughs in the world instead of just, I just want to be famous, make a show about me. He's not trying to be a reality star, he's trying to be a comedian. And he seems to know a lot about the history of comedy. He truly loves it. All the things he says, when he's talking about Sid Caesar and Mel Brooks, and that's like someone who knows comedy.
Mel Brooks is an on comic.
He's on.
Different from a regular comic.
Yeah.
It's almost like he kind of half understands it in a way.
Yeah, but see, he's a fan. He's a fan. A little deranged fan, but I mean, celebrity culture's always been, a thing. I think if you go, the history of Hollywood pretty early became a celebrity culture. But it's funny just to see how it's changed and kind of metastasized, I guess, over the year. This is 30 years ago, and that's
This is going to seem like 30 years from now, people will watch this and they'll go, what? What was the big deal? What? Isn't everybody like that?
Logical, the psychotic element was there were so many people left out. Maybe the good thing about our modern media world is everyone's kind of we're all living that Warhol 15-minute, you can have your own show on YouTube. Everybody's kind of more in on it, so maybe there's less frustration.
Maybe.
Back then, there were the haves and then everybody else.
Because there were 3 TV channels, yeah.
There were 3 channels and 3 stars.
The autograph hounds.
Autograph.
Those still exist, of course.
Oh, yeah, eBay makes autograph hounds. They're still out there, big time. But that's what Zimmerman talked about. His linchpin for the script was he saw a documentary on autograph hunters, and then he thought there's celebrity stalkers, and then there's autograph, how they're similar. Mm-hmm. Somebody who stalks someone for their autograph isn't that much different than someone who stalks them for other reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
So how that
I would just see that film.
feels kind of dangerous. What's that?
I would just see King of Comedy playing out today.
If it opened today for the first time?
Or like in today's world.
Oh yeah. I don't know. What would it be? It'd be a totally different movie, I think. Yeah. It's just a different culture.
Wouldn't have the impact. The story told today in today's world wouldn't have the impact. What if we have any other contributions from the audience? Right over here, yes.
In terms of Rupert's motivation, do you think he was always kind of shooting for something bigger than just getting on did he just want to get on the show? Was that, do you think, his ultimate motivation, or did he want something bigger the whole time?
No, he wants a career, clearly. He's asking what's his real motivation. He wants to, I think all his fantasies make that clear. He truly wants to be the king of comedy. he wants to be one of those guys.
So has
I
he
think
worked
so.
in front of an audience? We're led to believe he does all this in his basement. He's never worked in front of a live audience before.
You just feel like he's a guy who doesn't know how to get ahead. He wants to leapfrog from aspiration to stardom.
He wants to be a real person, I think, is what he wants.
Yeah.
You know, I think the self-actualization is he becomes what he perceives as a real person. He doesn't perceive of himself as this real person. And the way to become real is to become famous, is to be observed as real in the eyes of others. And it's so important for him to, even if just for a split second, to be observed by his fantasy objects as real, a real guy, you know.
I think his comedy, the thing his jokes were about his parents, him being a loser.
Yeah.
And I think that was revealing in a way.
But how do we know that's even true? We don't. I mean, he's still with his mom. I don't know how alcoholic she is. She seems like she's kind of together. She's
And
trying to keep going, at least to catch the bus. You know?
We also never see his mom.
We never see her.
So
yeah, but
it
you know
could be
this
a Norman
movie,
Bates.
everything's kind of real. The his fantasies are real. You know, if you're old enough to remember Tiny Tim, he got married on a talk show back in the late '60s. And
Johnny Carson.
all these fantasies and everything Carson took these long vacations from the show. Someone would take it over for 6 weeks. You know, all these are kind of real.
That was De Niro's wife, wasn't it?
Yeah, Diana Abbott, who plays Rita, she's wonderful. Yeah, that was De Niro's wife. I don't know if they were still married then, but yeah, they had been a thing for quite a while. She's in New York too, and some other things. She's great. That's a great performance. That's underrated, I think. Well, but yeah, just her tone, like the way she feels him out. You know, it's like, guess who I was just talking with? Your shrink. You know, like she doesn't really trust him, but he kind of slowly pulls her in.
And when he lets her down at Jerry's home, you know, it's just like another letdown. You know, it just sinks in. Another schmuck.
Yeah. And she picks up on it first, like, hey, we're not supposed to be here.
Yeah. I wonder if we have any other contributions. Yes.
Yeah. Do you think it's a possibility that the moments after his arrest are a fantasy that he's having? His success afterwards, like where he has his book out?
I think you can argue all that is, where does the fantasy end, or how real is any of that?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a fantasy. I mean,
You think so? Definitely?
The cardboard cutout, and then the scene where he steps in the spotlight.
Oh, in his house is a fantasy. He's saying, how about the end of the movie?
Yeah.
Where he's imagining.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
In the bookstore.
Oh yeah, the bookstore. Oh, that part.
Bookstore. Yeah, and then his monologue at the end.
I don't know. It's a celebrity culture that could make a. I mean, he didn't kill anyone. It was kind of. It's one of those human interest jokes that might actually create that kind of. Taxi Driver
It's open to interpretation.
has a very similar ending when you find out Travis is kind of. What the New York Post or one of those has made him kind of a hero, and he's sort of a local, he's been elevated into the public, media world. So I don't know. I kind of think it's real. I think I don't know. How many think the books, the $1 million, the movie deal?
If it's
is
real,
that all fantasy or is that real? I kind of fall in the real. It's as real as anything else.
I felt like it's real, but I'm thinking twice now. Who knows?
No, it begs the question.
The last shot is through the television.
Well,
like his dreams.
The very last shot is different. He's in red, and the way that
suit is really.
he just hears his name over. That's just that feels like more of a.
See, why would that
fantasy.
be? Why would that be a fantasy?
Right, that's
And
what
the
I
rest
thought.
would be real.
Yeah.
Like, he made it. And he has a book deal. But
He's not saying anything. They're just saying his name over and over. I mean, what kind of show is that?
I feel like that was the clincher. I feel like that end scene was the clincher to show you that it was all fantasy.
Well, here's one. The famous laugh track. Is he getting those laughs for real on the show, or are they just turning up a knob?
Yeah, right.
Right.
There was some bizarreness to the laughs on the Tonight Show. Like, some of them were laughs, and it was kind of
But the scattered
creepy.
applause
Yeah,
and it begs the question: is that real, or did?
We'll chalk up this uncertainty about realness or artificiality to the richness of the film.
Yeah, it's all like.
Don't you think the film is really like at that time? If you look at what was going on in America and what was going on with the oil crisis in the late '70s, there was like this American dream failure struggle that was happening, and so the film it's an anti-hero film, yes, and yes, I think it is real at the end with the book sales and everything. It's the American dream in like the highly near end of the 20th century American dream is what it was, and what you have to do, you have to kind of draw blood.
Right.
And there's many, there's other films that have the same theme. The failure of the American dream. Is it really
the delusion, the American
delusion, and
dream,
the residue
all
of
the
royalty.
success?
And the residue that we come from English,
That there'd be these elite blue bloods who live Jerry Langford's life.
Yes.
And then there's everybody else, but that dream of, but he doesn't, what Jerry tells him in the car is really very true.
You have to work.
When he says, it's an old hackneyed expression, but you kind of have to start at the bottom. And it's funny how Rupert cuts him off. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm 34. I'm ready. I just want to get to the good stuff. I don't really want to play clubs. Any good comedians don't even really get funny till they're 40, because they've been humiliated for 23 years on the club circuit. It's true. Look at they don't go deep until they're about 40. Louis C.K. I'm talking about every
Silverman's like
all of them.
25
Yeah, you can be funny, but you
Carlin
can't be
even.
great until you're a little older.
Jerry Lewis got a really early start though, because he started when he was like 3 years old or something.
Yeah, he'd been in show business. No, Jerry was killing it as a teenager.
He was doing a record act.
He's Superman of comedy. I mean, Jerry was the biggest from the 40s,
That was
50s.
that was before television.
Yeah, I mean, they had their own act. I love Dean Martin.
I really do wish, speaking of Jerry Lewis, I just wanted to pop this in, is that there aren't very many prints available, but one of the first things that I wanted to do when I came on here was do a whole series of Jerry Lewis, the complete filmmaker, the total filmmaker, so that people would see Jerry Lewis's work as a director, which is unbelievable.
I just think Nutty Professor is one of the great films. And I think he's just,
If you haven't seen the original Nutty Professor, it is one of the weirdest movies. It is so strange. It is so oddly directed.
Freudian. So his wife wouldn't let his kids see it because it was him. He's playing. Everybody thought, you're doing
Dean Martin,
but Buddy Love was kind of his darker recesses. So Jerry was never afraid to go there. That's what's kind of threatening about his comedy.
Yeah.
And the I made a crack kind of about the telethon. But do you remember growing up with the classic telethons of the 70s? He would stay up for all those days, and by the end, he would literally be out of his mind. Talk about like fantasy and reality, and you didn't know what world you were in. He would be giving monologues. He'd always have, crying, and it was crazy. But I think he kind of lost a lot of his American audience, slowly but surely. He said something to offend everybody at some point.
There's a guy who sells an entire DVD set of every NBA telethon.
I love that. I have a fantasy, like we should set up a booth here, and just for a year straight, you go in there, we're just showing telethons.
That'd be so
like a great art piece.
Some
you
of
can
it-
walk
some of
in
it's
24 hours a day, and there's it's the 1973, it's the one where...
It really would
Sinatra
get
came out.
good at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It would start getting real good.
Yeah.
The real good stuff.
Watch the stars come out.
Yeah.
Jerry is. Yeah, no, he's such a unique guy, and he's still kicking. He's still, bless him. He's, at this point he had already, I think he had a heart attack around this time. He's only in his late 50s or something. He was having trouble,
I think this was just before his first
he
heart
had
attack.
some health problems in there, but he's
He's
amazing.
We're going to wrap up the discussion, of course, but one thing I wanted to say, I wanted to ask you, so people have just watched this movie. Let's say some people just really love this movie. What's the next movie that you would recommend that they go and check out if they loved this?
Well, I would work backwards into the De Niro Scorsese library. You got 4 films, right back there. Raging Bull, New York, Taxi Driver, Mean Streets. That's great. And then go the other direction. Just see everything Scorsese did. He's the master, so. But, De Niro, what a career too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff.
Around this time he was doing, True Confessions, I think he had come off of.
Yeah, he was actually venturing out and doing some more odder, smaller.
And he didn't work with. I think after this, I don't know if it was because of the failure, but he didn't work with Scorsese again until
Goodfellas.
I mean, nothing conscious. They always
or throwing things past each other.
He didn't want to do Last Temptation of Christ, and that sort of led Scorsese into a different place, because Scorsese, of course, wanted De Niro to play Christ in that.
Yeah, and Scorsese had, I think, the failure of this film. He had a tough '80s, like a lot of people. I was saying, he rebounded from this with After Hours, a total independent,
which I like a lot. Do you like After Hours?
It's wonderful. After Hours is wonderful, and then he did Color of Money with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, which is great. I love that.
But it's like that's a real commercial movie.
Yeah, but it's still a Scorsese movie. He was just kind of fighting his way back into his career, I think, and and then he eventually did get to make Last Temptation and Goodfellas, and he had a much better, 90s and this century, obviously.
But he was in real danger of having what happened to him that happened to Cimino and Coppola and others, that they couldn't make movies anymore.
Yeah, well, Hollywood got sick of them. I mean, after Heaven's Gate, the quote from the studio is like, it's just time to take the movies back from the artists. We got to get the control from the artists.
Yeah.
So
I like
the
Heaven's
question
Gate.
there is, who do you give the control to, if not the artist?
I like Heaven's Gate, but I kind of wish it would have been a slightly better movie that resulted in the loss of artist control in Hollywood. It's pretty good, it's beautiful, but yeah.
It was a combo of that. There's always been a big movie that they're trying to gun down. Remember Ishtar a little bit later?
Which I also like.
I love Ishtar. Hey, who knows? We might be showing that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, damn
at some point down the way.
That'll be one of the later
Ishtar.
series.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen that Ishtar and likes it? Please. Yeah. All right.
Should we show Ishtar? We haven't booked that part of the series.
Yeah, all right.
We're gonna do it.
Ishtar. Okay, we'll do Ishtar.
The director's cut is even better than.
Yeah, I heard there's a new.
It's on Blu-ray.
But I wonder if there's a print of that.
And Elaine May is still alive.
Yeah.
Hey.
All right. So next week we've got Veronica Voss.
Veronica Voss. We're jumping to Europe. We're gonna do late Fassbinder, his Hollywood era.
His next to last movie.
German Hollywood.
Before
That's how
Carell.
I'll talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a very personal film. Carell is an adaptation of a novel, but this is a very sort of personal.
Yeah, it's beautiful black and white. It's shot so interestingly. It's kind of an homage to the Hollywood melodrama, I guess. So, but then so many good titles coming up. So
after that's Valley Girl.
Yeah.
We're going all over the place, and it's so exciting.
Young Nick Cage, he's so good in that movie.
He's great. Nick Cage is kind of great in every movie.
And that movie's very surprising. That's a good example of kind of an indie film from that time. They did that low budget, and it got decent distribution. That's an indie success, I think. Valley Girl.
And it's a movie I think maybe a lot of people didn't pay attention to and didn't see.
Yeah, everyone went gaga over John Hughes the next year, and what he did was very distinct. But films like Valley Girl were always trying to be made. There were always teenage movies. That just happened to be one of the better ones. So it was kind of one of those, like the title, you pick a little gem.
Jewel in the wastelands.
Yeah, which does describe the 80s. It was politically, culturally, it was a pretty grim time.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up tonight.
Okay.
Thanks all of you for hanging around.
See you next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick Linklater.